What's going on, guys? It's been a minute since I've made a video about the MR2. Today I'm going to be making a video on how much it cost me to K-swap this thing. Now that the car is running and driving, and I do have some more plans for it here in the future, I do want to make a video on how much it cost me to get to where it's at right now. For those of you who don't know, this is my 1991 Toyota MR2. It has a Honda K24 engine in it. Right now it is currently turbocharged, making 450 wheel horsepower, but I kind of want to talk about how much it costs just to get it running NA with the Honda motor in there. So this swap is becoming more and more popular in these cars, and yeah, there's not too many videos on the cost of doing it, and for those of you who watch the videos from the start, you'll know the steps I took to get this thing done. But in this video, I'm just going to be going over more of just the cost to do it. So yeah, I guess let's get right into it. So I picked this thing up a little over a year ago, and when I bought it, it was completely stock. This is a non-turbo model. It came with the 5S FE 2.2 liter, I believe, non-turbo engine, and I originally wanted an MR2 ever since I saw the video posted on 1320 video of Race Lab's MR2 that they had K20 swapped. It was making like 900 horsepower, and they were just waxing everything on the streets.
Honda motor. Oh wow, that's crazy.
Ever since I saw that video, I have wanted an MR2 and I wanted to K-swap it. So I went on the hunt, found this one on Craigslist a few months later, and I picked the car up for $3,000. I didn't plan on K-swapping this thing as soon as I did, but only after a couple of months of owning it, the factory 5S decided to throw a connecting rod out the side of the block. I'm not sure what caused the motor to blow up. It had fresh oil in it. I'm assuming the oil pump must have went out or something. Alright, so I was on my way home, and the MR2 started to knock, and I literally just blew the motor. I just blew her up, guys. And I didn't even take it that hard on it, so I have no idea why it started to knock. And then I just tried to get it home, and I mean, she's done. So this kind of sucks. Now I really have to get that K-swap done. I walked all the way up here where the bang was. I don't know if you can see it, but my car's way down there. So you can see the hazards blinking. What a walk. Anyway, look what I found right here. That is my connecting rod cap. Oh shit. I still actually have the connecting rod cap the day that motor blew up. Had to walk about a quarter mile to get that. It was out in the middle of the road, and that was the end of the factory 5S FE. So after the factory motor blew up, I started my hunt for a K-Series engine for this car, and I had just bought a sleeved block on Craigslist for 120 bucks. It was a GSR Golden Eagle sleeved, and I got it really cheap because the car was in a flood, so the sleeves were like a little rusted out and it needed to be rehoned or bored over to save the block. But the guy was just trying to get rid of all his Honda stuff, so I ended up getting that block and this HKS blow-off valve and some other things for $120 on Craigslist. I honestly think that these can just be honed because the rust that's in there is very light. So I'm pretty sure you can save this block no problem. So yeah, for 100 bucks, that's a really good deal. I ended up trading that block for this K24. This was in Brent's shop. It's just a junkyard engine. Probably has over 200,000 miles. So we're over here at PFI, and I just traded that V18 block I got for this K24 over here. So this is going to be going in the MR2 at some point. He let me have this motor for that block. It already came with the flywheel, the stock clutch, and came with pretty much everything I needed on the motor itself. I still needed a transmission, which then I found on Craigslist for 150 bucks. And then after I got that, I kind of had everything ready to go into the car. So then we pulled out the old blown up 5S, and then Hux Racing hooked me up with the motor mounts. The mounts on their website are $450. But they were kind enough to help me out with those. After I got those mounts from Hux Racing, I went ahead and threw the transmission onto the motor, got the motor dropped into the car. It was really simple. The mounts lined up great. They are solid mounts as well, but got the motor in there, and then I began to look for a wiring harness, shift cables, and axles, stuff like that, things I need to get the car running. And the harness came out of a RSX, I believe it was like a 05, that Brent purchased for a parts car, and the shift cables for this car are out of that RSX as well. And I ended up getting those for free. Brent was parting the car out, and I pulled the motor for him, and in turn he let me have the harness and shift cables for my MR2. So the harness is completely stock, and the shift cables are completely stock. The only thing you have to do for the shift cables is just flip it around backwards and then aim the cables back to the transmission, and then you have to make a custom shift bracket for the cables to make those work. Hux Racing actually just came out with the bracket for that as well, so if you order it through them, that won't be an issue at all. You just get the cables, order that bracket, and everything bolts right up. It's a really simple process. So I did get lucky with that as well. Got the harness and shift cables for free, and at that point I needed the Honda, which I also got from Brent for 500 bucks. And from there I started to just get the fuel lines hooked up. It just had the stock injectors, stock fuel rail. I was able to keep the factory tank in the car, so I didn't spend any money on the fuel system at this point. And I think from that point forward, I was able to get the car running. The axles in this car are actually just stock 95 Integra axles, just the driver and passenger side with the factory K-Series half shaft. It turns out the factory B-Series Integra axles slide right onto the K-Series half shaft and into the K-Series transmission, and the non-turbo MR2, I believe it's only the non-turbo MR2, has the same spline count as a Honda hub, so the B-Series Integra axle slides right into the factory Toyota hub, no problem. And that was really easy to do. Those cost me 120 bucks from AutoZone, and at this point the car was running and driving all motor, and I was using a turbo manifold with a dump, so I didn't have a turbo on it, but that was my exhaust, just a Sidewinder turbo manifold with a 90 to aim the exhaust straight up. And that's how I drove the car for quite some time. It made 160 horsepower all motor, and at that point, with the price of the car, I was only in it for about 3,800 bucks total. I spent about $800 to do the K-swap. So I got my K-swap done for really cheap because I got hooked up on the motor mounts, and a lot of the parts to do this swap I found for really, really cheap, either on Craigslist or through Brent. He helped me out a lot. But if I were to do this again, and considering you already had the car, I would say you could do this swap anywhere from 1,500 bucks to $3,000. Could be more than that if you want everything to be all nice and brand new, or it could be even less than that if you get some really good deals like I did. Another important thing to consider is that the K24 is a lot cheaper to do than the K20. The parts for these are much cheaper, they're easier to find, and the K24s you can find either at a junkyard or on Craigslist anywhere from like 200 to 400 bucks. I see them all the time. And the K20s are going to be spending a little bit more if you want a K20 swapped instead of a K24. But personally, the way I'm going to be doing this build later on, I want the K24 for more displacement, and then I'm going to be putting a K20 head onto that later on. So I do prefer the K24 overall. So off the top of my head, to do a naturally aspirated K-swap in one of these cars, you'll need Hux Racing motor mounts, which are about 450 bucks. You'll need to find either a K20 or K24. I would recommend the K24 just because they're so much cheaper. You can find one anywhere from like $200 to $400. You'll need axles. Like I said, I'm just using the factory Integra axles with the K-Series half shaft. Those ran me 120 bucks. You're going to need to find a transmission as well. I'm not sure if I mentioned where I got this one, but I got my transmission off of Craigslist for $150. I got it really cheap because the bottom of the bell housing had a piece that was cracked off of it, but I got that for 150 bucks. They might run you up to $600. Honestly, I'm not sure how much K-Series transmissions go for, but if you look around, I'm sure you can find a good deal on one. You'll need to find a wiring harness. Mine is just out of a stock RSX. You'll need to find shift linkages and cables, which mine are out of an RSX as well. You'll need the shift cable bracket that goes on the transmission to convert it to the MR2, which Hux Racing sells that as well for $90. And then you'll also need to find a Honda or some sort of ECU to run it. And I paid $500 for the Honda in my car, but you could probably just run like a factory RSX ECU if you don't need to go in there and tune it. So that's pretty much all you'll need to get one of these K-swapped. It's really not too bad. Obviously there's a couple things here and there that I didn't mention. For instance, if you're using the factory MR2 clutch line with a Honda slave cylinder, you have to get a custom line made to get those connected to each other. I had to get some coolant hoses ran, had to buy some new ones of those, had to get this little vacuum block right there. Just little things, you know, to get the swap running like it should. I was able to use a lot of the things that came with the MR2 when I had this running NA. I was able to reuse the throttle cable. This one right here is actually off a 3000 GT because the MR2 one eventually snapped because the way I made my bracket, it was like rubbing on a piece of metal. It was actually, I think it was rubbing on this edge right here, and it ended up fraying the cable and snapped it, which was my bad. But I was able to reuse the MR2 throttle cable. I was able to reuse the full factory fuel system on the MR2. Since then I have dropped the tank and put a fuel cell in it for the turbo setup, but when it was NA, I was able to reuse a lot of stuff and save a lot of money. So if you are trying to K-swap one of these and not have it turboed right away, I would say it's definitely doable for around a couple grand if you're on a budget and not trying to make it look super clean and not trying to buy the best of the best parts. It's definitely doable for really cheap. So like I said before, I was able to get this thing running with this K24 naturally aspirated for about 800 bucks in total, which is really cheap. It obviously would have costed me more if I had to pay full price for the motor mounts and if I didn't find such good deals on all the other parts as well. But yeah, I got it running NA really cheap, and then once I decided to turbo it, obviously I had to spend a little more for the turbo kit. So real quick, I'll go over what I have done for the turbo kit. And keep in mind, this motor is completely stock. I have not opened it up at all. It does burn quite a bit of oil because, like I said, it's just a junkyard engine, but it is holding the 450 wheel horsepower like a champ. I drive this thing all the time, and it has not once left me stranded, knock on wood. But real quick, let's go over this turbo kit. So the manifold I made myself, if you guys remember watching the videos. The flange I found laying at PFI, it was like really warped, and it is still warped to this day. It has really bad exhaust leaks on both sides. But I ended up making that manifold pretty much for free with stuff I found laying at PFI. The wastegate is eBay. I got that for about 60 bucks. The turbo is also eBay. It's a dual ball bearing GTX 3582R. That ran me about $600. This up pipe right here I made for free with stuff I had laying around. The wideband I paid 160 bucks for. That runs inside the car so I can have my air fuel gauge in there. The intercooler is under the trunk. I got that from Brent. It was really beat up and he didn't want it. He was just gonna throw it away, so I got that from him. It didn't leak at all, but I did have to modify it to make it work for my car. Now let's talk about the fuel system. This thing runs on E85. It has Graham 1000cc injectors that I got for a couple $100 from Brent. It has a Golden Eagle fuel rail that I got for $120, and it has a 10-gallon fuel cell in the front that I got off eBay, which cost me $110. And it has dash 10 feed line going to the pump, and then a dash 8 feed coming off of the pump to the rail, and then it has a dash 6 return going to a eBay fuel pressure regulator that cost me $60, and then from the regulator the dash 6 goes all the way back up to the tank. And the fuel lines and fittings cost me a little over $300, and the fuel pump is an AEM 380 inline pump, and that cost me $150. There's also little small things I had to pay for, such as the oil feed and the oil return, and my 4-port boost solenoid over here to do boost by gear and just turn up the boost through the ECU. Things like that probably added up to a couple $100 overall. Things like the silicone boots as well, just all the little things that you need to make it run. Once I turboed it, I also had to upgrade from the stock clutch because it could no longer hold the power. The clutch in it now is a competition stage 4 that a subscriber actually sent me for free, so thank you very much. That helped me out a lot, and it is still holding up great. Another thing I should mention about the car, when I go to start it up, none of the gauges work except for the voltmeter. Just kind of shows how budget I did this thing. So after adding everything up, with the price of the car, I was in it for just under $4,000 naturally aspirated, and then once I turboed it, it cost me about another $1,000 to do that. And overall, with the price of the car, I am in this thing for just over $5 grand as it sits, and it is such a blast to drive. I got it done really cheap. I found a lot of good deals on it. Probably would cost the average person a little more than that, but I still think it can be done for pretty cheap. As it sits, this car went 11.8 in the quarter mile at about 120 miles an hour. We're also in Colorado at a much higher elevation, but overall this car is very fast as well. I could definitely turn this thing up quite a bit more. These K-Series motors can hold a lot of power stock, but I'm worried that if I do, that I'm going to overpower the clutch that I have in it. And I also know that the factory K-Series transmissions don't like to hold a lot of power. So I'm gonna leave it at 450 horsepower for right now. Here pretty soon, I do want to fully build the motor that is in it, get a fully built transmission, and go all out on this car. I would love to see over 4 digits on the dyno someday. We'll see if we can make it happen. I also want to see this thing do a wheelie. That's like one of my goals in the future with this car. I don't know why, but I just want to feel a car doing a wheelie, and I think we can do it with this one. So I do plan on getting pretty wild with this car here in the future, so be sure to stay tuned. That is how much I have in the MR2 as it sits. Obviously, I'm going to be dumping a lot more money into it here once I start building it. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. If you do plan on K-swapping an MR2, make sure to check out huxracing.com. They have a big Q&A page. They can help you out with anything you need to know as far as K-swapping one of these. But yeah, that's where she sits right now. Definitely going to build her in the future. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more of this build later on. I'm really excited to get started on it. I've just been kind of saving up to jump right into it. But hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and as always, thanks for watching.